So, Jeff, exciting times, man. It's the first episode, a whole new show. It's pretty wild. And you met today's guest, David, at the hackathon. So that is a mind blower to me. So why don't you just talk us through a little bit about what on earth that is?
Yeah, so I met our first guest, David Hooper, at the hackathon back in March. And the hackathon, for people that don't know, it was a event put together by Deep Prasad. And what they were trying to do is get some of the top minds on the planet together in one place and hack solutions to the UAP problem. So they got some data from Gary Nolan on some crash recovery material, and they were doing analysis on that and coming up with all kind of different ways to figure out what UFOs are and how we can start getting data. And David was one of the people that I met there that just blew me away. I'm like, this guy is going to do important things. And what David has done, he formed a company to put together the first world tactical UFO detection platform. And we're going to talk about that. David's going to go through his entire system. And then we're going to talk about a bunch of other really cool stuff. Like, we're going to talk about consciousness and the phenomenon and all kind of things. So I'm really excited to launch the podcast with David Hooper.
Awesome, man. And it's funny to me that in the current news, we're kind of explaining everything as Lockheed Martin and the Tic Tac was Lockheed, and then behind the scenes you've got big tech and all of these experts studying the real deal. So it's going to be interesting to see when that wave crashes and kind of the excuses run out, isn't it? So I'm looking forward to it.
I think that wave is coming now. There's a lot of money in the tech space being invested into UFOs, into the phenomenon. And David is part of that. And let's get this wave rolling.
Amazing. All right, let's get to it.
This is my very first podcast. So you're going to be guest in episode number 1. And I'm really excited about it because we met at the hackathon. And I was super impressed with your work and what you're doing. And I was telling Tom a couple weeks ago that when I met you, I had this impression that you were going to be doing very important things in this space, and that I've been dying to reach out to you. So I'm really happy to have you on, man. Appreciate it.
Well, that means a lot to me. It was really a pleasure meeting you and having the opportunity to speak on stage with you at the night before the event. Remember at
Yeah.
Founders Inc. That was really great. And yeah, I take your comments graciously. I know there's a big responsibility on my part with regards to disclosure and the community, and to hold space for everyone to do things in a transparent, honest way. Because for me, one of the things I've noticed is there's a lot of um I don't know what to call it. There's negativity up and about in the space, and people can feel it, and it comes through, and people get upset. And I just want to be a beacon of light and a source for good and for a way forward. So that's what I'm all about. That's my ethos. That's my whole conviction, is to empower everyone.
I really, really respect that. I think that's fantastic. Yeah. The first thing I saw when I was taking a few notes earlier was when you said that you were there to empower other people and experiences and people that are having contact with this, and I really resonate with that. I think that's such a fantastic mission statement. Can I ask? So I saw that you were interested by American Cosmic. But I really am fascinated to know what particular aspect of that was it that sort of caused that ontological shift.
Yeah, to just be as transparent as possible. It's that search for God, right? I was raised Catholic, so I have been prescribed through my upbringing, through my mom primarily. She's a hardcore Catholic Mexican. She grew up in Mexico, came to the US, and she raised me with that foundation. So I had that. I went to a Catholic high school, like all boys, private Catholic high school for 4 years. I got 8 semesters of scripture, right? And I was actually really fortunate for that. I had some pretty good professors there at the high school that really showed me to question the narrative and like come to understand how these texts came to be, right? Through the different councils, the different ways that they were edited over time by different people, and for what reasons, right? Look at the power structures at play, and for what aim or what was the purpose why this was going on. And so with that foundation, that really helped me understand that the truth may be a little bit different than what we're told or what's written, right? It's coming in through interpretation and translation fundamentally. So we have to understand that. And with that, it really translates to the UAP topic as well. But to answer your question and like where I'm getting at with American Cosmic, I really liked how Diana framed it from her point of view of being a religious studies professor, and this whole journey that she went through meeting the two individuals that she talks about was really coming from that lens, right? Going to the Vatican archives, searching for the truth. And she was doing exactly that, which I referenced. She understood that there were translations, so you're not really getting the true story. And she went back to the Vatican archives and did the translations herself from the ancient Greek or ancient Latin to English. And so then she can really start to understand what these apparitions are. And she goes on to theorize that, these are UAP sightings, possibly, right? Or encounters with non-human intelligence, which I think is also pretty apparent that this is more likely what's going on. This makes more sense to me from my scientific standpoint. And so that's what resonated with me. I was like, oh, this signal matches my signal. So it's like a data point. It's a little bit biased, but I try to be pretty objective too, trying to like be reasonable with like new interpretations. I think that's really paramount with how I operate. Be open to new interpretations of like how things can be understood, so that even far out there things that could be misconstrued as wacky or woo-woo, you can still have it as a reference. I'm not saying like wholly adopt it, but have it as a data point. And then as you start to learn more information, that signal might increase. And that's what generally happens with some things. And I'm noticing that as I, venture into uncharted territories with UAP or NHI or disclosure and building out the technology.
That's a fantastically healthy answer. So how have you found, the more that you've investigated the UAP and another phenomenon, then how have you found that faith has kind of butted up against it? Has it reinforced it or challenged it in any areas?
Man, I'm thinking of so many things. There's so many data points.
Yeah, right. Because really what we're getting at is we're trying to understand reality itself, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're in the same kind of boat that I'm in, that the reality of non-human intelligence has become very real in your life, and you've had to update your framework, right? And that's
Exactly.
really why we're all here. We're trying to come to grips with the reality that non-human intelligences are real and interacting with humanity, right? And then how do we go about life with that knowledge? How do you just go back to the office and do your taxes and pay the bills? But there's this fundamental, like earth-shattering reality that we're dealing with, right?
Totally. And I think the best way it can be framed is Plato's allegory of the cave, right? And Diana excellently talks about this on various different podcasts. But for me, when you do venture outside of the cave and you start seeing things and experiencing things that others inside the cave would regard as like impossible or not real, it's really tough. You're dealing with the classic, this person is not understanding what they're experiencing, as like they're misinterpreting it, or it's like a psychological disorder. There's so many different things that people can say, right? But I think what's going on is two things. I think one, it's a temporal anomaly that's occurring as a subjective conscious observer of reality. You're kind of like shifting towards the future already, right? As like someone who's identifying a signal that reality may not be as common consensus or the status quo, you're like already placing yourself in a vision of the future. And so you're pulling that in closer, but there's there's resistance from the status quo to pull that future in, right?
Mhm.
It's like that future is waiting for you. And as you search for it and you bring it closer in, there's resistance from, the masses. And I think also that gets to how, in my belief, what I'm coming to terms with is that we're all co-creators of reality, right? And so I think that resistance is from the collective, um, I wouldn't call it ignorance, or the collective subconscious of humanity not having that dark night of the soul that occurs when you exit the cave, right? And so the importance here is, yeah, the theme is when we come back into the cave, others regard us as like too far out there, too woo woo, or like this person has flown too close to the sun. And you
Right.
can focus on that a lot if you would like to, but I think what's more important for me is I I firmly believe this shift, or this ontology framework is changing, that non-human intelligence are real. Like I can perceive it, right? And so for me, instead of like bickering about if it's real or not, I have belief and full faith that it's true, right? And so I'm making a leap. But what's more important for me is like, okay, I know this shift is coming. How do I, instead of like bickering and fighting, all this infighting, what can I work on that's real, that can like support others when that shift comes that people don't understand, but I know it's coming. So for
Mhm.
me, instead of the infighting, I can just work on the tech, I can work on the engineering. If I'm right, it's going to pay off. But if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, okay, whatever. I
Yeah.
was wrong.
Yeah.
But
And
at
you
least
built
it's being
something cool
productive.
anyway, right? Even
Yeah,
if you're wrong.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think here the lesson that I've learned is, how do we reframe ourselves when we're exiting the cave and coming back and going through these dark night of the souls to support others in a productive way? I think that's where we need to put ourselves in disclosure and in the UAP NHI community. How can we be more productive here? And I think that's my message to everyone. Like, ask yourselves that instead of fighting with each other about whether or not what we're experiencing is real, what can we do to be productive to support ourselves and one another?
Yeah. 100%, man. I mean, and that's really where I'm at too. I'm not out trying to convince anyone anymore about anything. It's like I've seen what I've seen. I've seen the data. I've had my experiences. I've met enough people that I know that are not lunatics, right? And they're credible. So now I'm just like, what can I do to help move the needle forward, to help other people like incorporate this reality into their worldview, right? So yeah, I'm right there with you. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah. Well,
I
thankful to have others in the fight for good. So
Yeah,
it's a
right.
good place to
Yeah.
be.
completely agree. I had it described the other day that the UAP acts like cultural acupuncture, and it just sort of pops up every now and then, and puts a little pressure point into consensus reality. And having
Mm,
experienced that myself, it's something that really drives me to help other people kind of feel reassured in that shift, because it's a one-way door that sort of quietly closes behind you at some point, and you don't really, at some point you're not steering the boat anymore. So I think it's really good what you're doing, but I'm very interested in how you would create a technology to study something which is, first of all, outside of our keyhole of detection, but secondly, has this kind of trickster element where it can negate our efforts.
Great, beautiful question. Okay, so when I was doing my first due diligence of the material, of like entering myself into the community, you have to get hip or get familiar with like who are key individuals or quote unquote insiders. That's has a certain connotation that can be taken broadly as like a bad thing if you're on the inside. But I just take it for what it is, someone who's predisposed to information, whether it's through their work or whatever. Um, I did a due diligence, kind of investigation on like what's going on, who are the leading sources for like what's truly going on, or closer estimations for reality, right? This new reality. So in terms of like dealing with the technology and the sensors and having a real technological platform for detecting UAPs, who's the best person that I can look at in terms of research science that would support any findings for choosing specific sensors? Well, for me, from everything I've checked out, Hal Puthoff, his work has been impeccable, right? And from places I've been, whether it be at Soul Foundation or other places at events, and just talking to people, you start to get a feel for like who these people are and what they really represent in terms of the grand scheme of disclosure. And I'm not trying to put off on a pedestal like he knows everything, but just from his experiences and what he's been privy to, I think we can. I think also there is this unsaid acknowledgement that they're trying to say this without saying it, that they
Yes.
know things and they're trying to share with you some insights that normally would be classified, but they're trying to like tell it in a way that doesn't violate their security oaths. And I think that's um, they're actually upholding those oaths by doing so. They're not violating anything, but they're really trying to push the needle forward. And I think you can look at the greatest example of this was when those DIRDs came out, all those scientific papers talking about next gen futuristic theories on like how quantum phenomena will work or how space time travel propulsion systems would work. They're really trying to do that, right? Through these papers, they're
Okay.
trying to push people a certain direction so we can start building tech to incorporate these insights from within the program,
Right.
right? So whether or not Hal Puthoff is a firsthand individual, right? You can fight about that all day you want. My thought is he is, and I'm going to go with the work that he's done, namely space-time metric engineering. He has a paper on that. Will help inform my sensor selection, right? So when I'm at Seoul Symposium One, I think this is in 2023, and I'm giving him a rundown down in the lunch area, and he's just, just looking at me like he can't tell me, like, hey, you're on the right track, but he's just kind of like nodding, like, have UV sensors, have thermal sensors, because those are both ends of the electromagnetic spectrum that you want to pick up for red and blue shifting, right? So namely this phenomena from the UAPs, we want to be able to test because, and this is a hypothetical, possibly within the program, they may have already come to this conclusion, that the blue and red shifting effect is real. And so this is like a key signature that you would want to look for. So this can help us in the clear world or in the public build out sensor technologies that they may already have within the program. And I think that's what's going on. And one little thing before I close on this response is I was in Texas with a friend and I met this deep tech founder. And he was kind of, asking me questions about what I do, what I'm involved with. And I told him about my startup. And he's like, why are you working on this? And I guess he's kind of, privy to some material or some deeper aspects of what's going on in the defense space. And he's like, this problem has already been solved internally within, circles. Why are you working on UAP detection? It's already done. And he was kind of trying to tell me to work on other things, right? Like this is a solved problem. Well, and I told him, well, in the public, we don't have this, right? We don't have a real system. So
Good.
I see this. So like, why not? Maybe it's already been solved, but just for the whole world, I get to build this and give this as a gift to humanity. That's how I see it. Even though it's already been solved, I think.
I really respect that, and I think the idea of citizen journalism, when it's so difficult to recruit into things like special access programs or our back engineering, let's say, then it must be so difficult to find the right people because you can't advertise. Whereas the outside world is dying to do this, and if people like yourself can catalyze the understanding of the whole phenomena with so many different brains out there looking at different aspects, then we're going to exponentially overtake any sort of control projects from the last 80 or God knows how long years. So how did you go about actually getting the thing made real, made material?
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that. I'm remembering as you're uh, speaking, the latter part of your question dealing with the trickster anomaly with regards to the phenomena. So I'll incorporate a response to the trickster into like how this came to be. So it was about when did I start this? Trying to remember backdating. So I got into the UAP subject late 2020, early 2021. I spent about 2 years just doing research, getting familiar with the material. I think it was late 2022, early 2023 when I really started to understand that my mission, or what I can prove to be useful for, is to build out tech. And what I noticed was just the classical UAP detection problem. People were, the whole thing is like, hey, why don't we have any good videos? Well, the military has some of the best stuff, right? And they've been leaked out, or they've gotten out from the DoD. How do we get the same sort of footage or data? So I thought, well, I'm an engineer. I have a background in reverse engineering, electrical engineering, computer science. I was an FPGA firmware engineer at Velodyne LiDAR, building LiDAR systems for autonomous cars. So I said, this is a perfect entryway for me. And really what it was, how do I envelop, or how do I put myself into this community? What value can I add? So I just thought of it as an engineer, I can contribute to something. And so I started researching what were the current systems out there. And I saw particularly UFO DAP. It's been engineered by this individual, this engineer named Ron, who lives in the San Fernando Valley. I've actually met him, who has an all-sky camera with a pan-tilt zoom camera with some custom Windows software that does the initial detection and tracking. It does a handoff procedure where from the all-sky camera that has a hemispherical view of the sky that does the initial tracking, it will then tell the azimuth and elevation values over to the PTZ cam, and then it will point to it, and then it will start tracking. So I started off with that. And the differentiator that I wanted to incorporate into this system that would make it special or make it unique to me was I wanted to make it mobile, because I saw everyone had these tripods, right? And they would mount it stationary on top of their house or on some land. And so I thought, well, I know the phenomena moves, right? People report it being mobile. So I want to make it on top of my car and design it in such a way where I can go out to hotspots or go visit experiencers. So that's what I did. And actually, to be a little bit more specific, I didn't want to purchase the system because he sells it for quite a few $1,000s when I knew internally the cost is much lower. So I thought, hey, I'll just reverse engineer it. I'll source the specs, the different aspects of the tech, and I'll do it. And then I'll write the software myself that I can. And then I'll still license and use his software for the time being, but transition out of it. So that's what I did. Instead of buying his system, I was able to source these, what they really are, repurposed security cameras that are like low light capable cameras to be able to see at night. And so using them, and then I 3D printed parts, right? Built different supporting structures for the cameras. And then from there, it was really just as I started to understand more what we're dealing with, especially with the trickster element, how to incorporate more key technologies into the system, right? Because the security cameras that are used, and they're usually Dahua cameras. I think it's a Chinese company that builds them. They're only sensitive to color and shortwave infrared light, but there's still long wave, medium wave infrared, and also UV that is in the electromagnetic spectrum that you really need to be able to see for that red and blue shift effect. So that's when I started to incorporate real long wave infrared thermal cores into the system. And then I started finding out, well, right, it's like the problem stack starts building on top of itself once you start to really build out the technology. So you can have a thermal camera core to detect redshift, but if you're not able to put that thermal camera core onto a PTZ to be able to track the UAP, then it's useless. So I had to build my own pan tilt head, right? And then I had to learn about slip rings, like delivering power and data around a revolving axis, like really specific mechanical engineering stuff, which I really don't have a background in, but I can do because I've done drone design. And so it's just building all on top of that. So there's all this whole technical stack of problems that you get to solve, which is really great from an engineering perspective, and it's just continuing to solve that problem, and then you have a whole system. So now what I have is a complete system that includes electro-optical cameras, but also some of the more special types of sensors for detecting radioactivity, right? Namely like beta or gamma rays or even X-rays. And then from there, I added atomic clock pairs for time dilation detection. And then what else? Electromagnetic field strength meters, right? Because there's often electromagnetic anomalies that occur, which actually occurred to me when I went out to go visit an experiencer. We were tracking a black orb UAP. It was actually my first encounter, and my laptop shut off. So that's a whole trickster element where it might selectively mess with you or augment your surroundings or even the technology. And it could be what I've noticed with the trickster element, it can either be conscious or unconscious or intentional or non-intentional, right? I think it may be a byproduct sometimes of just the craft, or it may be a intentional thing that is occurring from the UAP. So, but we don't know yet, right? So I think that's where we're headed to is like, hey, we had this data point where my laptop shut off during one of our runs, but we had no other sensors looking at that yet, right? Maybe the electromagnetic field may have shot up during that occurrence, but why is it the laptop is, getting this memory corruption issue when this is occurring? Kevin Newth really has done some work on this, looking at automobile systems as to like why these things happen from an analog perspective, but from a digital perspective too. I think more work needs to be done. So that's some of the shielding that needs to be incorporated into the detection systems so that you can counteract the effects of the intentional or non-intentional electromagnetic interference from UAPs.
Yeah, I remember you talking when you gave your briefing at the hackathon. You mentioned you put an atomic clock in there, and I thought that is so brilliant that because there's so many stories of time dilation or missing time, and that would give you the capability, at least theoretically, to detect that, right?
100%. Yeah. At least
Yeah,
it's it's a path forward, right? I'm not saying atomic clocks are the most precise clocks that we currently have. There are better ones, but they're very expensive. So from an engineering standpoint, you're trying to balance few key things, right? Weight, size, cost, technology, to make a product that people can afford. So right now, where we're at with technology coming down the line from people who make atomic clocks, the medium scale atomic clocks, about a little bit bigger than a phone, those are kind of the most affordable options. Where we really want to get to, and Jeff, I think this is where we can start to imagine the future. I think this will happen is chip scale atomic clock, CSACs.
Wow.
Those things cost thousands of dollars for a little chip. But imagine the day when all phones have chip scale atomic clocks for precise timekeeping. So now we can do on the fly time dilation detection as long as we have that CSAC in the phone and then a control source, right? Maybe at home or there's a universal synchronization that's done somehow. The technology still has to be figured out because there's a phase coherence that needs to be done with the signal, the clock signal. But I'm just saying that I think that's the future that I'm imagining, that some of the key technologies that we're going to be building out to show that consumers really do need atomic clocks in their everyday lives can start to push forward manufacturers in incorporating atomic clocks and drive the price down. So yeah, I think atomic clocks are needed. It's littered throughout testimonies. Missing time occurs, whether it be you driving down the road, you see you experience this huge light floodlight on your car, something happens with the radio, and then boom, you like knock out, and then you wake up 3 hours later down the road somewhere else, and the time, like what happened there? So if someone had in their phone a chip scale atomic clock and it was automatically synced at home, we can see if there was true time dilation, right? So it's just looking forward to that future that we can start building for.
Do you know if, because I know the phenomenon, like if you put an astronaut in orbit and he's going at a tremendous speed, and you were able to measure like with an atomic clock, he would be slightly behind in time, right? By like microseconds. Is that correct?
Yeah, what you're
Because
dealing
I'm
with is relativistic effects of time as you get closer to the speed of light. So it's been a while since I've taken my physics course, but what I do know is that relative to the person experiencing the speed that they're going at much faster relative to like someone on Earth, I believe time will slow down for them and then time will continue going on Earth the same. And so when they come back, time will be much faster, like way further ahead on Earth when they come back. So yeah, that sounds about right.
And I'm wondering though, like if your system is precise enough to detect, like I don't know if a satellite would give any kind of like time dilation if it's moving at a rate of speed fast enough to measure that, or it would have to be much faster than a satellite or anything like that. I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
atomic clocks are used up in satellites because of the issue with the time dilation effect. So I know they use them so they can synchronize the time and basically counteract that effect between the disruption of time between Earth-bound clocks and satellite-based clocks. So yeah, it's a real phenomena that occurs, and you can even like measure it going on top of a mountain if you took an atomic clock. I think there have been
Okay.
some studies to support that. So yeah, you don't even need to go up into satellite territory. You can just go up to
Oh,
like a really
wow.
high mountain, yeah, and take two atomic clocks, and you can see the difference.
That's
That's
really
pretty fun.
interesting. Can I ask,
Yeah.
because something that really interested me on a very parallel topic is gravitational lensing. If these things are working in, let's say, a gravitational bubble, apart from the sort of Doppler effect of the light being lensed around it, are there any other sort of telltale things that might be detectable?
Yeah, so I am familiar with the red and blue shifting effect, but more for the bending of light in and around objects that have large amounts of gravity, right? Because that's what's
Mm.
going on with super big stars and light bends around them and stuff, and we can detect that. I recall on uh UAP Twitter, I guess it's called uh UAPX now or whatever, X UAP. Um, there was this video of what it looked like a black. I'm describing it as a black hole. It's not literally a black hole, but it looked like a UAP that looked like a black hole, and it had some edging, some white edging effects around it. And so I'm not sure what the camera sensor that was picking up that image or that video, but the theory, that we're talking about here is the bending of light around a super heavy object or something that has a large gravity. So that makes sense for UAPs, right? If they are manipulating space-time and doing these gravity well distortions around the local space, then any light that comes in and around it, we should be able to see it being bent. The only problem is sensors for detecting that are really expensive. So what's a different way we can detect that? My initial thoughts, and this is not anything new, there have been people already discussing this, is using um, photochromatic lenses or lenses that allow you to manipulate the polarization of light to see if there's any residual effect on our end, looking to see if the light is being polarized in all directions, if it's being polarized in a specific direction, that may have some effect with the light bending in and around the craft. But I want to theorize that. The only issue with that is if you have these polarization filters, you need to have a way of like rotating them, right, to see the degree at which the angle of light is coming in, and also a way of swapping them out for linearly polarized or circularly polarized sensors or lenses. So yeah, it's just building a system to swap those lenses out. I think the Hubble Space Telescope also has like that mechanism, but it's huge to swap out different lens. But you need to be able to like put that on a pan tilt head unit
Yeah.
and be able to like swap
Yeah.
lenses. So it's really big. So there needs to be a way where we can keep the costs down low while still being able to shift out lenses. And the same thing applies, right? This problem of like swapping out lenses to test different effects, or the theory of different effects going on with UAPs, applies to the thermal segment too, right? There's two types of thermal zoom lenses. There's continuous zoom that allows you to basically rotate the lens and then you can get an up close shot. And there's like fixed zoom step lenses for thermal cameras. For It's kind of arbitrary or subjective. I think personally, the continuous zoom lenses for thermal camera arrays are more technically challenging to configure because you're dealing with, some type of servo mechanism to like rotate the lens, and that you need like feedback controllers for all of it. I think it's much easier to have like fixed step zoom lenses for thermal cores, and to build out a system to progressively at step intervals change the zoom of a thermal image. So we're looking at right now, like how can we best incorporate that technology into our sensor stack? Because right now we have fixed thermal lenses, and we want to move over to zoom lenses. Like that's where we need to be. You need a pan tilt head with thermal zoom lens to be able to get that nice crisp shot of a UAP. But it's a trade-off between continuous zoom lens, which costs $35,000 from China,
Yeah.
or you can bring it in-house, engineer it, and try to get it more in the $1,000 price point, in the thousands. So that's what I'm trying to do right now, and it's just working that out. But yeah, those effects are things that you want to test for, but you need the right technology to test out those things.
I think a massive strength of your system is the fact that you're not just capturing in one particular spectrum. It's multispectral analysis, and then that's going to give us such, if there is some form of cloaking, then you're going to be able to see it in one spectrum and perhaps not in others. And there's such value to that when we're trying to understand something which eludes our little keyhole of sensory information.
Yeah. And I think too, just a thought that just came into my mind is I think there's going to be different technological challenges when it comes to building out the stack when you're looking at a classical UAP and a orb, right? Because to be honest with you guys, most of the data I've collected being out in the field is of orbs, or at least what I think. I haven't seen really any classical, UAPs that Skywatcher likes to describe in the different shapes. Like I've never seen a Tic Tac in person, but I really have more relevancy and more experience with orbs. Being out with experiences, those are the ones that they call out more. So yeah, I think time will tell as we gather more data and we test out the different types of sensors, what type of cloaking mechanisms orbs are using versus UAPs. So they may be using similar technology, they're similar techniques. And I'm just really interested in getting that data so that we can start formalizing a framework for like, what are the key differentiators between UAPs and orbs? What are the similarities? And then building out a ontology map of like, okay, you have this pyramid looking UAP that does this thing, right? Cloaks in these ways. You have the egg that does this and that. You have the orbs, and they don't do half of the things that the classic UAPs do. And then once you have that map, then we can start to assign with the witness accounts and the testimonies, like if they saw maybe a being or they got some telepathic contact of some message, we can start to cross-reference the data points between the objective sensors and the subjective sensors, us humans, to build out like who and what are we dealing with, right? That's the kicker. That's where we need to go to, right?
Yeah.
And I think internally within the program, and then within the national security state and the intelligence community, I think that's the stuff that kind of they're really dealing with, and that's the stuff that no one really wants to talk about.
Yeah.
But I think it's time now that we start talking about that, at least out here in the open, in a responsible way. Like we're really dealing with other types of beings, and there's probably different morphologies and types, and we need to start assigning like what types of craft do these particular beings use, and what's their intention behind it. Is there a correspondence to the data that there's more Havana syndrome or effects to people being harmed with these types of UAPs, right? Like, and we can even start asking questions like, does this group A of non-human intelligences that are associated with these craft, do they have more of a predispondence to counteracting the effects of harm to humans, or do they just not care, right? That's like, we should start asking these questions and getting data, so then we can start to see who's who, and then who do we want to align and work with if we're not already aligning and working with any particular groups.
Yeah, man. I mean, and that's the thing that's so astounding is on one hand that more people aren't paying attention and asking these questions, right? The most important questions, like Why are we here? What is the fundamental nature of our reality? And what is it that we're interacting with or under observation by, right? And then the other thing that's fascinating is that Tom and I talk a lot about is this confluence of what seems like ancient religious, mythological, magical traditions that are smashing head on into technological innovations, right? We're coming to this strange confluence in history where the strange and mysterious can no longer be ignored, right? As many people as would like to can hear about the drones in New Jersey or about the Phoenix Lights or name your case and just go back to business. But it doesn't change the reality that we are dealing with something. So that's why I'm so excited that this is happening in my lifetime, that people like you are like, okay, let's actually try to figure out what it is that we're dealing with and what's flying around and in our oceans and start having a responsible conversation about like what are they, how should we be interacting or preparing or what questions should we be asking to deal with this reality, right? Yeah, man. It's what.
Yeah.
Tell me about the orbs that you are documenting. Like, what are you finding out? Like, are you figuring out characteristics that they have? Like, what are you getting, man?
Yeah, I would classify them as three different types so far. One being black orbs that look devoid of light. These are some of the orbs that don't really have like any glow to them. They actually look like a black hole just operating in space. That's the first group. The second group would be like the white orbs. They're pretty common. That's mainly with Chris Bledsoe. I've observed those. And then most recently would be like orange orbs. At Contact in the Desert, I did see some of those. And so, yeah, I personally, it's interesting to see the different types because they have different characteristics in terms of the what's being picked up on the sensor. Like the black orbs on the security cameras that have been repurposed, those are sensitive to color and shortwave infrared. When we picked up those during the day, the camera was in a configuration where it did not have its low light sensitivity on, so it wasn't being really sensitive to the shortwave infrared. It was just being more sensitive to color. And when I look at the data and I see it, it's really just looks like a black dot, and and there is some electromagnetic anomalies, right, with the laptop and then what I picked up on the sensor, but other than that, nothing else. Um, the white orbs that I see, and here's another thing with the white orbs, when I went out with Chris Bledsoe, that happened after I put the system down. We actually didn't see anything while the system was running, and that's where the trickster element came into play.
Mm.
That one, those were just, how would I describe those? Those seem to have more of like a conscious nature to them. The black one didn't really have like a conscious element to it. That just seemed like it was just floating off into the distance. The white ones do. The white ones definitely seem like they had some intelligence to them, right? And this is where we're getting into more subjective data points, like from my personal witnessing of the orbs. But yeah, I think, and it also interplays with kind of the experience with Chris when I was there at his property, that the white orbs didn't want to show up until I put my stuff away, right? And so there's this theme of what was my intention, what was my state of mind when I was there, and it was primarily like making sure the technology stack was working, and it wasn't really giving space or kind of an opening for that to come in and give gratitude, as like Chris likes to call it, for those white orbs come in. So yeah, that's more of like an intelligence playing with you. I'm perceiving it, and then the orange orbs. That's, I guess, the most interesting at Contact in the Desert. I did see one at Contact, and I think this is now where it's tough to talk about this, but I think it's time to. We all have the ability to co-create reality. And I think what we're starting to find out is there may be not tricks, but there might be methods by which you might manifest or co-create reality more than another conscious being. I think that needs to be fundamentally understood or acknowledged that, hey, there's sort of like a hierarchy of understanding of how you relate to the cosmos and reality and how you can interact with it. Maybe non-human intelligence have a better understanding of that, and that's why they're able to manipulate reality more, send us feelings of love, able to like send us telepathic messages at will, right? But I think we humans also have this innate ability. It might be vestigial from who knows. And we should not necessarily write off this ability because it allows us to interface with UAPs and NHI,
Mm.
right? And we can see this from Chris Bledsoe. And I think even personally, all of us, I think we all have the ability. Um, so with the orange orbs, um, I in my mind, I was like actively trying to like elicit a response, or I was trying to actually meditate or like initiate contact. And I did feel like there was some connection between me and the orange orb showing up that like I asserted some will into doing so. I'm not saying like I'm a summoner or anything, but like I wanted it to happen and I saw something happen. Okay, so now I'm making that claim, right? How do we go from someone making that claim to proving that? That is the most important point. I do not want to just state that without like, hey, there needs to be critical thinking and uh, technical time spent into how do we prove this if someone's making that claim. So now that I've experienced it, right, my mind is set on like, okay, can I repeat this? And can I not only repeat it for myself, but for others? And I think that's the holy grail. Can we include true random number generators and EEGs, which Chris has already shown on like the History Channel at the series at Skinwalker Ranch, where he's put on the headset. I think a new video just came out yesterday with him and his daughter showcasing that too. How can we incorporate this technology to validate that we are co-creators of reality, and we can use an interface that is in these containers, these bodies, how we can use that to connect, right? That
Mm.
is the thing. What is that communion or what is that contact look like? I think we innately have it, but we get to start using it and validating it. So for me, it's EEGs and TRNGs to support this experience. And
Yeah.
that's with the orange orbs. I did have that experience. And so now I'm just like, okay, I just ordered a 32 channel EEG system, probably
Right
the most
on.
cost effective. Yeah. So now we get to go out and like use these with people and validate it. And then also I already have the TRNG set up so that we can see if people are able to exert some type of conscious intention over the distribution of random noise to make it not random. And yeah, that's where we're heading.
When you're testing your system, how are you setting it up in like known hotspots or random locations? Are you using CE5 or what's kind of like the protocol?
Yeah, 90%, 95%. There's only been a few that haven't been experiencer led, but it's all pretty much going out to experiencers. I'm looking forward to doing more trials with hotspots. It's just that with the hotspot locations, it's a little bit more boring, to be honest. So with
Yeah.
experiencers, you get to have a personal relationship with someone and develop that. So that's where a lot of my time has been spent. But what I'm looking forward to is doing at least one field mission a month for the next 6 months to prove out the technology, to kind of also corroborate the experiencer data that we've collected and
Oh,
continue the
wow.
experiencer stuff too. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
there's hotspots all across the West Coast, California, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, even Washington. So I have a
Yeah,
good couple states to hit up.
that's great. Well, we know Tom and I know some people and hotspots if you're interested. Yeah, man. That's really fascinating.
Yeah. And
Sorry, David, carry on.
I was just going to say one thing. You guys earlier brought up the connection with mythological or ancient cultures. I think if we have some time, I would like to talk about that.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, there's so much there. And a lot of people like to write it off as just like these old stories, but it's the kind of the basis of our understanding of who we are and where we come from. And I think we will find out in the near future whether or not a lot of those stories match up with our current understanding of reality as we get more information, as we start to more openly engage with non-human intelligences. We'll start coming to terms with those stories and like figuring out what the alterations were, right? But there are for sure common themes. Like the flood myth is a really common one, right? This myth that we all had one language, maybe that was telepathy, who knows? And this whole myth about like our creation and genetic manipulation, that's very there's a provenance of that, of the, the genetic taking of egg and sperm from female and male subjects in the abduction phenomena. So there's all these corollaries there in the ancient myths, and it's not like it's anything new. It's like it's still going on today in similar fashions, especially with the abduction stuff. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to make a little point that what you said about repeatability, I find really interesting because our current need for repeatability is the same person at the same in the same conditions, laboratory conditions. And yet, when you look at experiences, the repeatability is in those experiences rather than the same person because it doesn't show up at the click of a finger. But the people that are having these experiences, it's your intention and like Chris Bledsoe says, the gratitude and these moments of appreciation and reflection, that seems to be a correlation between being noticed by this thing and not. But also, I wanted to get back to what you've just been talking about, and I know that you're interested in the idea of control systems, and I'm really interested. I don't think it's a threat to religious beliefs if we understand them and integrate our scientific understanding a little bit. And when you get like the biblical stories of the angels, and the first thing they do is say, "Be not afraid," and then you get Betty and Barney Hill, where she's all of a sudden just having a nice,
Mm.
relaxed conversation with things, and often in experiences the first thing that will happen is some little entity says, right, don't worry about this, like you're okay, that everything's okay, and then the person is completely relaxed, and I don't feel that is heretical to consider the crossover point. So in light of this being some form of control system, or at least having some investment in our development, have you got any wild speculation about what that relationship might entail?
Definitely. I definitely have a lot of thoughts on what may be occurring. They're pretty far out there, but I can support it with different data points and sources and research. But really, to me, it's apparent that there is some type of control system that is, and I'll be really specific. What I mean is there is a the best words that I can use to describe it is there's a subliminal, ethereal, you can't see it, but there is some technology that exists in the fabric of the cosmos that limits our perception of reality apart from just our eyes, our five senses, right, and our mind. There's something that is like a veil, like a filter, and I think it's autonomous, and there's also structure and rules to it that um, imprison's not a really good word, but I would just say that limits for a certain cognitive experience uh play for us humans to like participate in. I think that's what's going on. And whether or not it's negative or positive, I'll just put that aside. I really think it's a neutral experience, and you can make it what you want, right? Us being limited to this space-time matrix and the limitations of our body, and like not being able to like easily just like jump through time. Like I can't go to the future and back, or I can't go to the past and back. I'm like stuck with the present moment. I think that's part of the design, right? And individuals, and I would consider myself to be one of those individuals that want to understand more about the nature of that fabric of that reality and want to like jailbreak it or push past it. I think that's normal in a way once you reach a certain level of technological understanding about like the system that you're in, right? And the ancient Greeks had a really good way of looking at this and the different forces or powers at play that are in and around us that we can't see. And there's different ways to talk about this, right? You can talk about it as a spiritual world. You can talk about it in a technological standpoint, but it's what it really is from a physics point of view. It's quantum mechanics, right, at play, and that's where all the spooky stuff comes into being. Um, my thoughts on it are essentially it's real. It's a real structure that we're here to deal with, and what we want to do with it is up to each individual. So some people might like don't mind it, whatever, and they just want to enjoy life and being human and being here on Earth. Some people might want to like poke at the filter and try to see like what it is, but other than that, they don't want to break through. And some people just want to shoot past it and like go outside of it. So in that last camp, I want to
Yeah.
know, but what does that mean fundamentally? And
Mm.
this is where we get metaphysical. And this is where maybe our understanding of what's outside that reality or even that control structure, we may not be able to understand. And this is where people like to even talk about like, you really can't understand God because if you knew, you would like, it would be so overwhelming that it would just be an experience that your human body can't take. And that starts to make sense to understand like the limitations imposed on this construct to be able to actually experience it, right? And a lot of spiritual traditions or traditions that like are into consciousness talk about this, about like how we're, if you had like um, consciousness itself and you wanted to like fragment it so that it can have an experience, well, what would you put it in? You would put it into like a space-time metric so that it can only perceive certain things, which it tracks, right? So that's kind of like my understanding of what's going on. Um, Here's the thing where I think the evil or the negativity comes into play, and where I see is something negative about that construct, about that control system. I think it's only because of conscious users or beings within the hierarchy of the matrix, whether it be here or outside of the construct, that seek to employ even more control outside like the paradigms of nature, where they're like exacerbating or like going beyond the normal functioning of like letting nature flourish. And what I mean by that is like, let's say I was a being that existed outside of this control system, the space-time matrix construct, right? I had UAPs, I was able to come in, be in any different form, I was able to envelop myself as a human or be a higher dimensional being. If I started like fucking with people, right? Going back in timelines, messing up with people or just enslaving people and all this different stuff. And I just like enjoy doing that. I don't know, like I would want to know who that is and like why do they think they can do that?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And so I'm can in my personal research and what I've looked at is like there's thematic elements of this, right? And I want to know who those beings are, and they can be referred to as old gods. So that's some people like to talk about them. But I think they're definitely real, and you never know. You may have met one of them in your life, but that's really a push. But I'm just saying that I think this is stuff that we get to start talking about, and if we're dealing with UAPs, NHI, and the control system, this is where we're at.
Yeah.
We've got the concept of like the jinn and stuff, and that fits what you've just described perfectly. I mean, I love that description that Dr. John Mack gave of flying a plane in the dark, and you've only got your little limited instruments, and then you've got no idea of anything outside of that. And we've got things like the jinn, which are kind of just like us, there's positive ones and ones that certainly don't care, and other ones that are actively against, and it seems to fit the observations that we're having with it, but without being able to specifically determine between the different things that we're. It all has to go in the same bucket of things we don't understand yet, and that's one arm tied behind our back a little bit. But it's a fascinating take.
Totally. And I think what's really interesting is that, Robert Bigelow, after he owned Skinwalker Ranch and he sold it to Brandon Fugel, he got really interested into afterlife studies. He had this whole competition where a bunch of people submitted different written works talking about what is the afterlife. So my current leading theory, and I'm kind of putting myself out there, but that's okay, is that there's something regarding the afterlife or the process of initiating death or going through death that allows you to transcend that control system. That's what I believe. And I don't know where I saw this, but I saw this image of basically, and it had like this quote of this like UAP like leaving this portal, and this portal was a portal to the afterlife. That sounds very woo-wooey, but from everything I've experienced, it's kind of tracking that some state after death may be accessible with UAPs possibly, or at least without UAPs through the death state. And you have ancient mythic schools talking about this, where they undergo these initiatory death rites, and they actually come back from that place, and they're able to prophesy about past, present, and future timelines, at least for the future. And I think there's something to that, but it's still, it needs to be backed up with science. And the hard thing is, like, how do we deal with these topics of death and transcending life when you're dealing with really intimate and hard to talk about subjects? And how do you apply science and technology to it when it's you have to be very careful and responsible? And how do you be moral and ethical about these things? My thing, and this is going to be kind of heretical. I think we should let women decide. I think women, for the longest time, have had a natural inclination to this transcendence of states, and at least in ancient times, it worked for them. We used to go to these oracles to ask about like what an emperor or king should do, like go to war with another country, and it seemed to work. They were able to prophesy about the future, and I think maybe we should return to that, or think about that more and see how we can incorporate that into like where we're headed to as a species towards the future.
Yeah, for sure. Do you find that CE5 is more or less effective depending on if you have women or men or anything like that?
Okay, there's another heretical thing, but it's actually not that heretical when you actually understand and when you hear people talking about what's going on with regards to contact protocols. I don't condone this, or I'm not saying everyone should go do this, but I just want to acknowledge this. The use of drugs as technology to be able to enter altered states of consciousness, to initiate contact, and to be able to more easily facilitate contact is happening within the tops of the top of summoners or experiencers or psionic assets. That has to be, everyone has to like understand that and come to terms with it. And we should talk about this in a responsible way where we can start incorporating supporting structures and technology to assist people in a way where it's helpful and supportive, right? What I'm not saying is it should turn into San Francisco where everyone's passing out needles for everyone to do drugs, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like, how can we build technology that gives you data about what someone's going through when they're in an altered state of consciousness, induced by drugs, that allows them to initiate contact? What I found, to answer your question, is that drug use really allows for that contact to happen. In terms of male or females, I think at least the lay of the land of the community, it's more like it's really male dominated, right?
Yeah,
From
it seems like it.
researchers.
Yeah.
Yes. from researchers, historians, or government officials, or even military pilots, you have people like Alex Dietrich, which I met. She's great. She actually helped me came up with the name of my company from the very
Oh,
beginning.
oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah, she's awesome. Um, so yeah, it's very male dominated, but I get that. I believe that gets to change, and there's a reason for that. Not just to balance it out, but I think women have a very natural intuition and ability to engage in telepathic protocols, and yeah, that gets to be restored in some way or fashion. But at least for the current being, it's not the case. But my co-founder Sam, she's a female, and to be honest with you guys, it was a strategic part on me to choose a co-founder that was female to balance my male subjectivity and my male energy with her female energy and her female, well, everything that she brings as a female. So I'm very thankful and grateful for her to join me on this mission. And yeah, I think in CE5 sessions, what I notice most is that drug use being like real to kind of kick it off. But well, yeah, what are you guys' thoughts on like the use of drugs and contact protocols?
I haven't really thought about. I just kind of assumed that people were using psychedelics and maybe cannabis uh, to kind of get them to that altered state. But I haven't really thought that deeply about it. But I'm very interested in what's his name, the researcher. I think he's conducting it out of in England, but they've developed that way to keep people in a DMT state for as long as they want, and they're mapping out the terrain, the psychedelic terrain. And he's showing that these people are reliably having the same type of experience, right? They're running into entities, right?
I'm I'm so happy that research is going on, especially with DMT, because it reminds me of two things. One, I took this course, um, Peter Levanda, he writes with Tom DeLonge the different books. Um, and he had this course with this other individual named Marco called Stairway to Heaven, where they talk about the ascent to heaven and it had these seven levels. So there's definitely some type of mapping from ancient traditions, and they have all their different spins on it about ascending into altered states of consciousness. And I think it's very real. Um, and I think where we're at now as a society, it's going from these mystical experiences and having these shamans and these individuals that are kind of like cultivating the society through different practices and systems and having that augmented through different types of tech because traditionally it was augmented through initiatory dance, songs, sexual rites, drug use, right, to
Hmm.
entry into these
Right.
states. But I think now we have the computer technology and now and moving into quantum technology to be able to like give us data points regarding like these um, contact protocols or these engagements with the other. And so that's what I'm really excited about.
Yeah, and I think that's coming very soon to where they'll be able to just put some electrodes on your head and without drugs put you right into whatever that
Mm.
liminal space is, right? Be able to just turn it on and you'll be there. And who knows what we're going to find.
What I'll
Yeah.
say about this is that, Jeff, you just hit the nail on the head. What if, what if we can take, oh, and I want to be careful with how I phrase this. Without the use of drugs, or maybe there is a way to psychotronically or with technology, and you see the term technology can apply to many different things. And it's also like, how do we control someone's mind to be able to elicit a response where they can enter into an altered state? And I think CIA has already done a lot of work into this, right?
Yeah.
Where they were looking at into this phenomena. And I think this research really hasn't gone away, and it's actually really critical to the whole topic of disclosure and psionic assets. Um, and it's a little bit of a taboo subject, but we do have people starting to talk about it, and it's tough because there is a lot of dark subject matter involved with how we can elicit a response with someone's mind to enter into an altered state without the use of drugs. And you're dealing with things such as like hypnosis, meditation, and effectively mind control. That's what it is. And so we have to be really careful there, because there's a lot of there's actually a community of people talking about being in different programs, whether it be in GATE at a very young age, the gifted and talented education program, or even within the program being in these different sections where they were pragmatically induced to be able to elicit the response of contact, right, through different mind control programs. And what do we do with that concept, right? Face value, do we want to accept that that's their experience? They could be lying, they could be telling the truth, or it could be a little bit of both. Like I said in the past, everything that I'm doing, I try to really supplement it with technology. So if we can start to validate or come to terms with what people are saying about these things in a way that's supportive and it can bolster their experience, and also like get to the truth about what's going on, I think that's the best approach, right? Like, instead of fighting, instead of being like, okay, this person's just making a BS, this really didn't happen, I don't believe them. Okay, what can we build to like prove or disprove what they're saying? That's what I'm about.
I'd love to make not a counterpoint, but a slightly different angle on the same topic. I personally don't I think that drug-induced states are clearly very powerful and obviously have a switching effect for people. But my own personal subjective belief is that this thing interacts with us in a very specific way, in the same way that we would speak to a child. We weigh up its age and its capability to handle different levels of heaviness, and then communicate with it appropriately. And when you take something to force that change in it's taking away your conscious awareness. Russell Targ refers to it as timeless awareness, where you're just kind of seeing what's out there rather than trying to figure out what's happening. And I am more interested in things like the flow state, or when people channel. Like, when I've had strange experiences, it's when I've been doing something like playing a guitar or playing a video game, and you're conscious, you're not actively rowing the boat kind of thing, and that allows this thing to come in. So I'd be more interested in studying the relationship between a flow state, however you get there, whether it's the Gateway program from the Monroe Institute, or people that are very, pragmatic and materialistic. Maybe that's where a chemical catalyst helps them a little bit more. But I think there's the history of the wizardy woo types and the creatives and the artists. They're the ones that seem to tap into this morphic field, or that idea of there being something external and you're the attenuator. And I find that a really interesting aspect of the discussion.
Me too. That's
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Jeff?
Yeah, well, I just think like it comes back to this idea of the confluence of the ancient crashing in with the new technological paradigm we're in, where I think that in the past that humans, we developed complicated, very structured systems to tap into whatever it is we're referring to, this phenomenon. And that's exactly what all these magical traditions from every culture, they're all similar. There's always all the different aspects of these magical traditions are similar. There's carved writing, there's intention, there's the focus, there's synergy between different types and sympathy between different types of object. And it's like, yeah, I think we figured out a long time ago technologies to tap into whatever reality actually is, and we have forgotten those. And now we're coming face to face with a new reality where the technology is kind of pulling back that veil. And now we're going to enter into a very strange new world, uh, to where, we're going to be able to maybe access this directly through technology, or a mix of technology and chemicals or magical traditions. And that's why I think these conversations are so important. We need to have a discussion about what that means. Like, for example, what would happen if 10,000 people are conducting a UAP summoning ritual? Like, what will happen?
Yeah.
Like, maybe we should discuss that before we do it, because I look at what was happening, in South America, Central America, 2,000 years ago. Like, what were they using the pyramids and these mass sacrificial rituals? What were they trying to do? And I don't think they were doing that just because they were superstitious, right? They were hyper advanced, hyper mathematics. They had chemistry and biology of the highest caliber. That's technology. They've developed ayahuasca in the Amazon. And so I have, I'm so excited about like what's unfolding, but there's also like this caution, like, what are we actually playing with, you know? So yeah.
Yeah. It's that age old like don't play with fire, you know,
Yeah.
because
You mentioned Icarus, when we first started talking, and it's like, yeah, what happens when we strap on these wings and fly up there and then they melt, right? We're not ready.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to be having these conversations because I've been thinking about this for a long time, been engaging with a lot of material and different people privately, but I think we can lead the change in a responsible way to have cordial, open conversations and see where that goes. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys having me on.
So David, what's next on your horizon, man? What do you got cooking?
Yeah, well, I'm very excited to announce, I mentioned it on Twitter, but we received funding from 1517 Fund. We're part of their Flux Capacitor program. I'm actually going to be headed to San Francisco tomorrow to attend, firstly, SFD Tech Week. I'm going to be giving a talk on the future of humanity, introducing my company, what we're building in terms of the technological products for consumers, and for government eventually. And from there, Sam, my co-founder, is going to give a talk on her philosophy about engaging with this company, our company, and how we can steer it towards something productive, aside from just a technological product, but be really a mission-driven company that's pushing the needle forward for disclosure in an ethical and responsible way. And then lastly, I'm going to be talking about kind of themes that we talked about here, my visions for the future of humanity for disclosure and like what types of products way out there that I would want to have. Um, like we were talking about earlier about intention, right? One of the products that I could perceive us building is once we nail down to like reliably identify and detect UAPs and like also identify the consciousness link between humans and UAPs, right? That protocol, that contact modality, once we can like identify the signal in these technological systems from the sensors, then how can we build products that identify when we are being psychotronically manipulated emotionally, psychically, right? That's what I really want. I want to know, hey, and I also want an NHI detector. Like, is that
Yeah.
person that I'm looking at, they look human, right? Are they necessarily human or like is that even possible? And would
Right.
we even want a product like that out in society? That's another question that we need to have, right?
Yeah.
And who has access to that? And do we want a society where we can actually have privacy? Because the topic of privacy is a discussion where we need to take it there and we need to have that discussion because you have these autistic nonverbal children and the telepathy tapes. If they can read your mind, and it's proving out to be that they can. What do we deal with secrets?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big topic. So I'm going to be discussing some of that, and how we can have some products revolving around those themes. And then the thing that I was talking about with the fund, later on in the week on Saturday, I'm going to be going to the kickoff event for the Flux Accelerator program. So it's going to be cool meeting the partners of the fund and meeting the other founders that are working on their own startups. So I'm very excited for that. And so that's what's going on this week. And then moving on to the next 6 months, it's using the capital that was invested into the company to really build out the first line of products for people within disclosure, people that look up into the stars and try to look for UAPs. So we'll be releasing at least one or two products, really simple things just to start. And then building out more of the scientific rig, right? The bigger platform that includes all the sensors and upgrading some of the thermal cores, implementing some of the zoom functionality for thermal systems, and then incorporating some of the passive radar capabilities into the system. Because that's one of the bigger portions of like our capabilities is how to reliably have a system that does passive radar where you don't have to like choose the active transmitting source. Because I don't know if you guys know about passive radar, but you need to have like a tower that's transmitting some type of signal to act as your like beacon to map out the skies. And then we're just reading that and seeing any disruptions over time. But right now it's all very manually done, like any open source projects out there, and there's a little bit, it's all very manual based. So there needs to be a polished dashboard UI, maybe a web interface built on React that's like an app almost, where it would do passive radar and it would auto select the nearest transmitter, telling you like, hey, here's the quality of the signal of this FM radio tower, of this digital television tower. You would want to use that, and it just makes it seamless. The issue I foresee is that with ITAR restrictions, you're going to have a legal pushback from the government. And so that's where I'm looking to get support from 1517 Fund and from other founders that, hey, this technology will be built out. Passive radar for the masses will be built out one day. And if we don't do it here in the United States first as an American company and build out all the technology here and all the manufacturing, China's going to do it, and they're going to have an edge, and they're going to have passive radar. And we don't want to see play out what happened with Ukraine and Russia with these FPV drones and these containers and then coming out happen here in the United States. I'm not saying China would do that, but they could, right? Them buying up farmland and property and having shipping containers, and then, releasing drones or doing something to the effect of having just imagine China builds out a very go-to passive radar system, and they have them all across the US, right, at all Chinese nationals' properties, and they're building out the passive radar infrastructure that the United States does not have and the American people do not have. So what I'm looking to build out is that passive radar device. Mitch Randall talks about it with his Skywatch project. I know he's been looking for funding. He was seeking $3 million for that program, and he gives a really great write-up on his website what that money would be used for. I'm trying to do it with much less than that, orders of magnitude much less. And I think it can be done, or I know it can be done. So it just takes some time and getting something out there that's polished on the software end. The hardware end is pretty much like 90% finalized. It's like a lot of people have already done it. And there are consumer products out there around like the $700 price point that does passive radar. But even then, when they released the feature set as an open source thing, they had to like pull the source code. I'm talking about Kraken SDR. And so I already know in my future, my timeline, I'm going to have to be dealing with that and have like the right attorneys dealing with that. Yeah. And so it's cool though, because there's people at the SCU that have been already talking about it. And so that's what's down the timeline. That's what's coming. And I'm really excited because I'm excited to grow the company, onboard more people, more engineers. And lastly, what I'm really excited for is to re-energize or to change up the culture in disclosure community. I was just talking to my friend Sam about this, and also the founder of the Yale UFO Society, Sydney. We were talking about kind of the culture of UFOs. It's not sexy, it's like
we're trying to change that.
Yeah, I know, and really it can be done, right? Like with especially the younger generation, where they're into like, all this like cool promotional videos and talking about things in an edgy way. I think the same thing can be done with UFOs and product lines for UAP adjacent technologies that we would be building. There must be a way to invigorate the scene with a coolness, a sexiness, that'll have to come from the women.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
to invigorate the whole thing. So it goes less from like this being a gate kept secret from the military industrial complex, going more towards like broader acceptance of NHI and UAP and the products that come with it and the spectral revolution of psi phenomena. So that's where I'm headed to with the company, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's a lot going on. That's good. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long until you think you actually have a commercial product ready where I could go online, buy it, pop it on my car, and get rolling?
Um, yeah, great question. So there are different tiers. The first tier that I'm envisioning is the introductory tier, where there's three sensor nodes. The first, and I talked about this at my SFUAP hackathon briefing, a $250 around that price point product that would be a passive radar device. That would be the first one. The second one would be an atomic clock device. And the third one would be a thermal camera device. Those are entryway products that build on top of a platform that would all integrate with one another for a
Oh,
UAP
cool.
detection problem. Yeah, so that would be right around $750, $1,000 across those three products, but you can start off initially with one of them. I'm looking to do the passive radar implementation first. That's probably the path for least resistance for getting consumer product out. I'm looking for like 6 months to a year to be able to do that. For sure, the initial consumer prototype, the MVP, will be 6 months, but for something actually like manufacturing, I think would be by next year. And then, so that's like an entryway consumer product. From there, an order of magnitude greater, like 10x, like $2,500 system. Um, it would be like a higher fidelity um, sensor, right? Um, and it can just depend which one you want to do, as I talked about earlier. But it would be like a higher fidelity one that it would really be like upgrades higher. And then from there, you would go to like a $25,000 system. That would be like a full UAP detector for a prosumer or some like an institution. And yeah, and that would be like this is like you would want a full faceted multispectral stack that would be there for like 25K. And I know that's incredibly expensive for like the average person. So that's why there's the 250 and the $2,500 mark,
Hmm.
which can still get you reliable data. But it just wouldn't be like a complete system. And to like operate something like that, you would need like a couple people, like a $25,000 system.
Yeah.
And then from there, like a 250 or a $2.5 million system, it's a big jump from the 250 to 2.5 million, but those would be geared towards like governmental or military applications. And
Hmm.
yeah, someone asked me, oh, you know what? It was actually the fund that we applied to. They asked me like, hey, you're building all this technology to empower humanity and to empower people. Well, why would you sell it to the government, right? Or why would you sell it to the military? And my answer was we can build out the products for consumers and go that angle, but if we are able to do a dual use system and sell to the government or get a contract or a program of record for like Arrow once they come to terms with that they can't do it in-house or they can't even do it with Georgia Tech, at their Texas field site for their technology stack. They're doing great work, but it's just they're going to have to contract it out, and we want to be positioned to be able to do that, to supply that, because we're going to be doing all the hard work already, right? And you don't want to have a defense prime to like support that. You would want to have a person that understands the field and is representative of that community and a
Hmm.
founder of that be supporting the mission. But I'm not sure if Arrow or DoD will align to that. It'll have to come down to the numbers and the technology. But if we can prove that we like reliably detect UAPs versus Skywatcher or Androl or one of the primes, that's that'll be the end of it. We won't have to say anything else. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
I ask a
I
bit
can
of a
imagine.
sideways question? Do you have any plans to create like a nodal network where your $250 user can maybe tee up the $2.5 million one on the other side of the mountain, and create like a network?
that is the entire plan. And
Yeah.
we will be partnering with a company called OpenNHI. My friends deep in Maryland founded that. They're actually the organizers of the SFUAP hackathon, and they're going to create that blockchain network to be able to support the posting and the aggregation of that data and to make sure that it's valid, right? So that's another thing. You want to make sure that this sensor meets certain technical specs, meets a certain format for the data that you're pushing up to the cloud or to the network. And they're going to build that supporting infrastructure. So yeah, the whole thought is like a classical scenario is someone has a sensor in Sacramento, right? And then in San Francisco, there's like an area that they don't have good coverage in. Well, maybe in Sacramento, you have a long range passive radar sensor that is able to pick it up. So it's able to fill out those gaps in coverage. So that can all be done, this like multimodal node network. It just, you need to have the supporting hardware and the software infrastructure to support that. So I'm focused on the hardware mainly and doing all the embedded system software. And then Deep, Maryland, and others can do all the cloud services and all that. Yeah, no,
That's cool.
yeah, I'm a embedded systems guy, so I love the hardware. I love the sensors. It's like where I like to play in. And so every day that I get to work on this is a dream. And I think this is why I was sent here to be on Earth to be working on this, to be honest with you.
It feels like it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Marilyn is working with artificial intelligence, right? So she might be able to put some analytics on that data and really come up with some cool information, right?
Yeah, I think it would be amazing. The military may not be happy with this, but to have a citizen-wide aerial monitoring network, right? I'm surprised we don't have that already, but I think it's just the technology has been hard to come by. But we can support that with the hardware, and then others can support it with the software. So I'm excited for that. Yeah, it's time that we have that.
Yeah. And one thing when you were talking about the passive radar that entered my mind, I wonder how powerfully the government's going to push back because I don't know. I understand vaguely how the passive radar would work. It's basically picking up disruptions in whatever the signals that are being transmitted, right? So you're like something passed through this airspace because the signals have been disrupted. And I wonder if there's a concern about it picking up stealth aircraft, right? I
Yeah,
don't know if this, and they might be like, no, you can't do that.
yeah, that's the thing, right? I think
Yeah.
through the workings of the intelligence, through the workings of the intelligence community, you may have representatives that may like want to kind of like push you and nudge you um, covertly or kind of like in a way that's not very apparent. Like, hey, you need to think about national security here. If you publish this data or you build this infrastructure, it's going to leave us wide open to attack, right? So we need to balance that and be able to responsibly have a plan of action where we can build out this technology and have it safe while still not leaving us open to attack because it's the classic FPV drone thing, right? um,
Mm.
I was building FPV racing drones back in 2015, right? And so I was at the very forefront of it. I was racing competitively, and when we were building these drones, we were talking about like what the future would look like, and we thought about like, it's not that hard for someone to strap a bomb to this and make this into like a weapon. And so the same thing can be done for passive listening devices for radar use, and then allow it to like look at stealth aircraft or look at like gaps in our infrastructure for our national security. But I think in the same light, it's a race, right? It's a race if we can build out the infrastructure first, and we don't want to be last in that race. So if we're first in the race, we can describe or we can narrate and we can create the reality that we want in an effective way. So that's where I want to be. I do not want to be with the FPV situation. That's where I want to take it.
Totally agree. That allows you to work with the special access programs in a way of saying like, this is what's possible, this is what we can see. What you do with that information's up to you. I think that's a very commendable cause.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, David. It's been a pleasure to have you. I'd love to have you on again and talk about lots of things. I'd like to really talk to you about like what do you think about the consciousness aspect of the phenomenon and many other things. So I'd love to have you back on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And it was such a pleasure. Can't wait to come back on and give you guys an update where we're at like 6 months down the road and also talk about the products that we'll have ready by then and then just any new updates. So, yeah, thank you again.
Great.
It's been
Thank you
great to
so
meet
much.
you, David. I know somewhere with a good flat roof and a clear sky if you need a test site.
Oh, awesome. Where are you located, Tom?
I'm thinking of Spain in particular. My mum lives over on the coast in Spain, and we've seen some really cool, weird stuff over there. But the sky is just so clear all the time, so it would be an amazing place to get a hot test.
I'm so down to go over there. I actually was thinking of living in Spain for 2 years, so
Mm.
I might move my family out there. I'm thinking about it still, but yeah, if any place I could go to, Spain would be cool.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, it's been great to meet you. Absolutely fantastic.
Likewise, Tom, and thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome.